Urgent, Russia is in turmoil. Ukrainian armed forces drones have trapped the enemy in a deadly ring. The Russians are tired of counting the strikes. The first footage of the rout is already online. Gerasimov has miscalculated again. The special operation Truba in the Kharkiv region has failed. Ukrainian paratroopers have broken down the Russian army to the molecular level. Shock, Germany is on edge. Moscow has made its first statements towards Berlin. Russia is on high alert. The Crimean Bridge is living out its last days. And all of this has happened just now. Hello, I'm Darina Hatsakalo, and we're getting started. Powerful explosions have rocked Russia. Ukrainian drones have triggered a domino effect right on enemy territory. Putin's top targets are disappearing one after another. In Osman, Lipetsk region, minus the local oil depot. Our forces also hit Bashkortostan pretty hard. The dictator sang a farewell song to the petrochemical plant in Sterlitamak. 6 precise strikes and everything is in ruins. The Russians can't hold back their emotions.
Is this actually the 4th or perhaps the 5th strike? Well, it's the 6th one, damn it all.
Something's really burning hard right now.
Since last night, Russian Penza has been in contact with Ukrainian defenders. The Russians are complaining about the strikes. Public channels leaked that their pride was hit. The bearing plant.
Oh, no.
I saw it go off right at the moment of the explosion. There was this kind of fiery ball. It appeared inside it, I guess. Just like that, but only inside it.
That's already an explosion. That's not the plant.
Tver isn't sleeping either. The likely target of the attack is a railcar plant nearby.
Russian air defense, using electronic warfare, brought down our drone onto a high-rise building. Other consequences of the attack are being clarified.
Significant debris scattered everywhere.
In the Leningrad region, drone fragments fell on the territory of a compressor station. The Russians are in shock.
The Russian Ministry of Defense emphasizes 129 drones shot down. Therefore, we are waiting for clarifications from the General Staff of Ukraine to know exactly over which targets the Russians were shooting down drones.
Meanwhile, the Russians also came up empty-handed in the Kharkiv region. Putin's army tried to break through via the Soyuz gas pipeline and ran into Ukrainian paratroopers. Gerasimov's blitzkrieg fell apart before our eyes. The first details of the lightning-fast operation.
The enemy is operating north of Novoplatonivka, moving toward Novokrulyakivka and beyond Rizove. About 50 people were involved in Russia's attempted breakthrough.
Ukrainian soldiers reported that at least 40 occupiers were successfully eliminated. The enemy did not achieve its objectives, and the situation on this section of the front has been stabilized.
The enemy continues to operate in small groups and tries to infiltrate between positions. The actions of the occupiers are under constant control by the defense forces and are being stopped.
A prelude to a hot conflict. Germany's Ministry of Defense is sounding the alarm over Russia's hybrid attacks. Things could get worse. Bloomberg reports this, citing information from the ministry.
Only after an open armed attack on NATO's eastern flank will Germany increasingly be at risk, or it will be subjected to attacks using military means such as long-range missiles, armed drones and special forces.
It has become known that Russia is already trying to probe the protection of infrastructure. Germany, and a decisive step toward escalation could be taken as early as 2029. In
the event of a conventional Russian attack on NATO's eastern flank, Germany will not become a frontline state or a battleground. There will be no direct confrontation between ground forces, the ministry stated. However, Russia will do everything possible to prevent or at least hinder the deployment of NATO forces on the eastern flank for the purpose of deterrence and, if necessary, defense.
The Kerch Bridge is holding its breath. The Russians are nervous and preparing for a massive defeat. An urgent order to bring all available flotilla to the peninsula. From the
side of the Black Sea and the Kerch Strait, closer to Kerch, they are simultaneously on patrol. A Project 22-460 Okhotnik patrol ship from the FSB Border Service of the Russian Federation, 2 Project 21-980 Grachunok anti-sabotage boats, and a Project 1204 Shmel artillery boat.
At the same time, according to information from public sources, the Russians are literally not covering the bridge from the Sea of Azov side. Apparently, they are indeed nervous about a possible new devastating strike by the SBU on the crossing. So let's keep our fingers crossed and wait for good news from our side. A warning signal. The Kremlin has sharply intensified its activity in the Baltic region. The connection has been cut. Infrastructure is under attack. Moscow's shadow fleet has come out of the shadows and is targeting vital EU facilities. Putin's plan has begun to be implemented. Several countries are under threat at once. NATO was caught off guard. Europe is in panic and sounding the alarm. Is there still time to stop the escalation? All the most important details about this coming up in just a moment.
Sabotage on the high seas. On December 31st, Finnish police detained the vessel Fitberg, which was en route from St. Petersburg to Israel's Haifa, on suspicion of damaging an underwater telecommunications cable laid from Helsinki to Estonia through the Gulf of Finland. Was it?
What is the ultimate goal to transport valuable cargo to the Mediterranean Sea from St. Petersburg with this particular vessel? That is still a very, very big and significant question that remains unanswered. In many cases, a ship from the Shadow Fleet, the so-called Russian fleet, under various flags, we still call them Russian because when you start digging, well, first of all, they're under sanctions. And secondly, as soon as you start digging, suddenly Russian flags are raised on them and they get registered in the Russian registry.
According to media reports, 14 crew members from Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Kazakhstan have been arrested. The detainees began to be interrogated in the evening.
This particular date, which is widely recognized as the 31st day of the 12th and final month of the calendar year December, marks the conclusion of the annual cycle and is often associated with reflections on the past year and anticipations for the upcoming new year. And if nothing like this had happened again, one could say that unfortunately such an incident occurred, but it does not repeat, and so on.
The police stated that they are investigating violations of telecommunication systems under aggravating circumstances, as well as sabotage and attempted sabotage. Under aggravating circumstances.
There are 2 different concepts in international maritime law. One is the regime of maritime waters. The second concept is the regime of the maritime day. This is the so-called exclusive economic zone. In exclusive economic zones, everything on the seabed and beneath it is the property of the coastal state. Any illegal actions are potentially subject to serious legal and criminal prosecution with severe consequences.
Finnish authorities have also launched an underwater investigation in the area where the cable was damaged.
We understand the geography. Finland, Sweden, and Norway, which is not part of the EU, are 3 countries that are essentially cut off from the rest of Europe, because by land they can only reach continental Europe through Russian territory. And when, on a systematic basis, cables that provide communication between Northern Europe and continental Europe are being cut, that's a problem. And that's something significant you might typically do if you're preparing to launch an attack on the region of Northern Europe.
The Finnish National Bureau of Investigation stated that there are both similarities and differences between the current incident and previous cases. Damage to underwater infrastructure in the Gulf of Finland.
I believe it's high time for the European Court to change its protocols. The behavior in the Baltic Sea, both regarding the Shadow Fleet tankers and the incidents where cables are cut. This is not a coincidence, it's a deliberate pattern, and accordingly, we need to fight against it. And when you don't fight it, you end up with a repeat of the same incidents.
Last Wednesday morning, on the eve of the New Year 2026, the Finnish telecommunications operator Elisa discovered a malfunction in its cable and reported it to the Finnish authorities. The company also stated that the damage did not affect the operation of their services in any way and that all of them were rerouted.
The Gerasimov Doctrine, the hybrid warfare doctrine of General Gerasimov, was announced back in 2007, or more precisely made public. It has since gained substance, real substance, through actual activities, especially in the period after 2014. And in parallel with the large-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia's actions are also directed against European countries. The Russians are waging a hybrid war against Europe.
It should be noted that a year ago, there were similar incidents involving damage to underwater cables. Such an incident has already occurred in the connection between Finland and Estonia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A major sensation. Trump's condition has sharply deteriorated. The White House leader's hidden diagnosis has leaked into the public domain. America is shocked. The politician's career could end dramatically. In the US, there is talk of emergency scenarios with the elections just around the corner. The White House is in turmoil. No one was prepared for this. The first details are coming up.
Is Trump on his deathbed? International media are publishing sensational insider reports about Trump's illness. Moreover, the US president himself has acknowledged his health problems. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has admitted that he is taking high doses of aspirin, has swelling in his limbs, and periodically experiences hearing difficulties. However, he insists that he is in good shape.
He was saying that Biden is kind of old, that he's not ready anymore, but Trump himself isn't exactly ready for the presidency either.
According to Trump, he takes a lot of aspirin every day to prevent cardiovascular diseases, despite doctors' recommendations to reduce the dose. He admitted that this leads to bruising, including on his hands, which sometimes have to be covered up with makeup. At the same time, he refuses to lower the dosage, explaining that he has been taking the medication for over 25 years.
The head of the White House confirmed that he wore compression socks for a while due to ankle swelling, but later stopped using them because he didn't like them.
Trump also sometimes experiences hearing problems. People speaking to him have to raise their voices, especially during crowded events. Trump himself denies having any serious hearing impairment and claims that difficulties only arise in noisy environments. The White House doctor stated that the president is in exceptionally good health and is fully fit to perform the duties of head of state. According to the results of the ECG analysis, Trump's heart age was assessed at 65 years even though he is 79. But despite the fact that Trump and his entourage deny any serious health problems, the Democrats urge people not to trust Trump's assurances since he may not be able to fulfill them precisely because of his health condition.
The Democratic Party. They see this as a chance to return to power. In other words, they see that their opponents, the Republicans, are not living up to expectations. And accordingly, they start throwing out arguments like, why do you trust Trump so much? Can't you see he has health issues? Problems, and also with Epstein. There were some shady stories, and his entire circle is extremely corrupt.
But experts link the emergence of such statements from the Democrats more to an attempt to highlight, in principle, Trump's inability to make complex political decisions. Moreover, it has dropped significantly. The approval rating of the American president among the population. The approval rating of US President Donald Trump among working-class Americans has fallen to a historic low. Newsweek points out that the reason is voters constantly having to struggle with issues of job availability. The publication notes that this situation could affect his party's success in the elections to be held in 2026, as well as shape the second half of his presidency. Indeed, Trump has health problems, which he himself has acknowledged. And this is now working against his political career, as it is compounded by the dissatisfaction of Americans. And this is an opportunity for the Democrats to strengthen their influence.
January 2025. When he became president, he made a lot of promises. He promised to make America great again. He said that prices would go down. He said there would be no inflation and so on and so forth. But as 2025 comes to an end, people are seeing a completely different picture. And if in January, February, March, maybe even April and May, there were high expectations, then somewhere around the middle of 2025, disappointment began to set in within American society.
Whether Trump will lose his influence because of this is hard to say, but
but the fact that he didn't fulfill what he promised, at least to the American people, seriously undermines his political standing. After all, fewer and fewer people believe in him. This has just come to light now. The Kremlin elite has started to crack. Putin is reportedly preparing large-scale purges. Even Defense Minister Belousov is on the chopping block. A fierce battle for the bloody throne is starting in Moscow. Old players are returning to the game. Shoigu is back on the field. Meanwhile, there are intrigues and behind-the-scenes conspiracies. They're trying to outsmart the dictator. It looks like the real Hunger Games have begun in the Kremlin. The first details are coming up right now. Belousov is on his way out. Rumor has it that Putin wants to replace the defense minister.
Andriy Romich, you adding something? No, everything is.
According to the established plan. Very dynamically, I would certainly say Valery Vasilyevich was significantly ahead of the anticipated pace that had been planned earlier. Indeed, in December, we reached the highest pace of the entire year.
The whole point is that the bunker dweller is not satisfied with the slowness. Andriy Belousov regarding the capture of Donetsk region.
According to several of our sources in the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin is dissatisfied with the fact that Andriy Belousov cannot promise the complete liberation of the DPR this year. Andriy Removich upsets Vladimir Vladimirovich when he says that it's unlikely we'll liberate the DPR before February or March of 2027. There are no decisions yet regarding the Minister of Defense, but we would recommend that Belousov reflect on this. About working more efficiently, a source in the Kremlin close to the president told us.
Putin is dissatisfied with Belousov, and it's not the first month. One of the nails in the coffin of Belousov's ministerial career was the failed operation in Kupiansk.
The Zapad troop grouping took control of the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to retake.
The Zapad group's units chose the city of Kupiansk.
So that's it. It's completely finished.
That is, the city is under our control.
The city is under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, but Putin was lied to, being told that Russia was advancing successfully.
Accordingly, all this creates a distorted picture of what is actually happening. And Putin, who boasted to Trump, for example, about military successes, claiming that somewhere they were advancing, it turns out there were no such successes. Of course, as they say, every problem has a surname and the name of a teacher in this case. Every defeat has its own father. Putin doesn't want to take on this responsibility himself, but it's easier to shift it onto...
Regarding the situation with Kupiansk, Belousov tried to make up for his guilt before Putin and started talking about problems in that direction. But it didn't help. However, it was Belousov's planned terror against Ukraine that saved him.
Vladimir Vladimirovich categorically rejected the information that Kupiansk is not ours. He was receiving reports of successes from Gerasimov and was himself making important statements about the liberated city. In the defense minister's report, the president saw an attempt to misinform him for some unclear purpose. To be honest, he got very angry and wanted to immediately dismiss Belousov, our source in the Kremlin familiar with the situation told us. According to him, Belousov kept his position only thanks to the strike on Kyiv that was carried out on Saturday. Vladimir Vladimirovich decided to give a chance to the minister who so vividly shows the world the power of the Russian army and delivers important blows to the capital of the Kiev regime. Belousov. Somehow you could say I was lucky.
But not last week, as about the possible resignation of Belousov.
They want to shake up our game to give it a new impulse, but as we can see, there is no new impulse at all. And I think that removing Belousov is technically possible so that Putin himself doesn't have to take responsibility for these failures.
Kremlin-affiliated channels are reporting that while Belousov is being shown the door, one old reindeer herder is triumphing.
I want to thank Sergei Kuzugetovich Shoigu for what he has accomplished over the past years, for building up the armed forces, for giving them a new look.
The former Russian defense minister, now secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, is already preparing a plan to return to the post of minister.
Rumors about Vladimir Vladimirovich's dissatisfaction with Belousov have reached Sergei Shoigu. Despite several unsuccessful attempts, he has not given up hope of returning to the post of defense minister. Sergei Kuzugetovich is preparing his own plan for the swift selection of the DPR. There was already such a plan in the summer, but Putin did not accept it seriously. And literally in a couple of weeks, he will present it to the president. Sergei Kuzugetovich is happy to offer his military experience in these difficult times. Don't forget that under Minister Shoigu, the special military operation began and a successful mobilization was carried out. And a lot of other things happened. I think the president will draw conclusions about who deserves to hold the post of Minister of Defense more.
However, even such courtesy and Shoigu's efforts to return to the Ministry of Defense are unlikely to help. After all, if Shoigu were such a skilled leader, he wouldn't have left the ministry at all.
He wouldn't have left and moved the entire left side of the body, and also he would have shot himself out the window, thrown himself out. That's why there's no trust in him. Plus, on top of everything, he lost his authority in the army. And without authority, there's really nothing to do there. And
as for Belousov, his future career is pretty clear. He will leave the Ministry of Defense. And it seems he's not really against it, since he took the position at the Ministry of Defense reluctantly.
there are plenty of cities, enough blue ribbons. They could send him to the Federation Council, for example. There's Valentina Matvienko there, an old lady. She's already over 75. They could give him her seat. They could make him her deputy so that in a year he could replace her. Or they could send him to the State Duma, for example. They could send him to the Security Council. After all, they found a position for Medvedev, invented the post of deputy chairman of the Security Council, so they'll come up with something for Belousov too. As I understand it, Belousov didn't really want to go to the Ministry of Defense, actually. He comes from, you could say, a purely scientific academic background. He just got pulled in there. And that's not his field at all. And he probably understood perfectly well that all the blame would fall on him.
The future fate of the Ministry of Defense's leadership will depend on the chief of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov. According to experts and analysts, he is practically the only military man whom Putin trusts. Yes, he lied about Kupiansk too, but he's a loyal dog.
Valery Vasilievich, your report is accepted, thank you. The situation on the line of contact. Is that clear?
So, it is Gerasimov who will propose candidates for the position of the new Minister of Defense to Putin.
Most likely, it will be someone very close to the current leader, Putin, perhaps one of his most trusted aides, or even an individual who will actually be personally recommended by the influential Gerasimov himself, a key figure in the military establishment. Gerasimov is the most trusted among Putin's military figures because he did not support the Putin-Prigozhin alliance. And we know that Popov and other generals had dealings with Prigozhin. That was the hardest blow for Putin. He felt vulnerable, realizing that the army was not on his side. That's why he needs support within the army. He believes that Gerasimov is actually a decent soldier.
Who will be the next Russian Minister of Defense is still unclear. But one thing is certain, Shoigu will not give up trying to stay close to power. With that, we conclude our episode. We continue to closely follow the most relevant events so we can be the first to tell you about them. Don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.